Late December 1941. The frigid, churning waters off the coast of Great Britain were a silent battleground, far from the roar of guns or the clamour of air raids. Here, in the invisible depths, lay a sinister harvest sown by the German Kriegsmarine. Thousands of sophisticated sea mines, each a potential coffin for Allied shipping. These silent sentinels of steel and high explosives strangled vital supply lines, claiming vessels and lives with indiscriminate fury. Merchant ships, their hulls laden with desperately needed war materials, navigated these perilous waters with a dread that transcended the threat of U-boats or surface raiders. For many, the true enemy was not seen until it was too late. A sudden, concussive jolt from below, followed by the terrifying rush of water. Yet within this landscape of unseen peril, one quiet, unassuming individual would soon challenge the very nature of this silent war. Ensign Arthur Jensen, a United States Navy diver, was then a fresh face in the European theatre, assigned to a mine disposal unit supporting the Royal Navy. He held a deep, almost philosophical aversion to the destructive chaos of the war, a trait that seemed at odds with his chosen profession. Little did anyone know that this soft-spoken man, a connoisseur of order and meticulous detail, would become a reluctant architect of a different kind of destruction, one that paradoxically saved lives and vital resources. But beneath the churning waves, a different kind of battle was being waged, one that demanded not brute force but calculated courage. This is the story of Ensign Arthur Jensen, whose quiet ingenuity would transform the perilous art of underwater mine disposal, redefining heroism in the silent depths and charting a new course for naval warfare. Jensen's journey into the grim realities of naval warfare began not with an explosion, but with a series of quiet observations. He was a man who saw patterns where others saw only chaos. The existing methods for mine disposal were brutally simple: drag a sweep wire hoping to detonate contact mines, or use a depth charge to set off influence mines in a broad area. For divers, the task was often to locate a specific mine, attach an explosive charge and detonate it, hoping the blast didn't trigger other unseen mines nearby. It was a strategy born of necessity, but one that filled Jensen with a profound sense of inefficiency and waste. Each detonation was a blind act, a concession to the enemy's design, sacrificing not only the mine, but often the chance to learn from it. Moreover, the destructive power of a mine blast, even underwater, could damage nearby structures, compromise fragile harbor infrastructure, or even disturb the seabed in ways that made subsequent clearance more difficult. The German TV magnetic influence mine, in particular, was a nemesis. These cylindrical steel behemoths, often weighing over a ton, lay silently on the seabed, triggered by the magnetic field of a passing ship. They were designed to detonate directly beneath a vessel, breaking its back. Sweeping for them was a costly, dangerous endeavor, often requiring specialized non-magnetic sweepers that were few in number. Divers were only used in specific high-priority situations, usually after a mine had been positively identified by acoustic or sonar means, or, tragically, after one had already claimed a victim. Petty Officer First Class Arthur Jensen, barely a year out of advanced dive school and quickly promoted due to his exceptional technical aptitude, spent his first months painstakingly documenting the remnants of these devices. He'd descend into the murky waters, carefully sketching diagrams of fragments recovered from blown-up mines, studying their structural weaknesses, and pondering their intricate triggers. His superior, Lieutenant Commander Thomas O'Connell, a seasoned but conventional officer, often found Jensen's obsession with dead mines peculiar, but respected his thoroughness. Jensen also befriended Seaman First Class David Miller, a younger, more jovial diver whose boundless energy provided a stark contrast to Jensen's quiet intensity. Miller saw the mines as pure evil, things to be eradicated with maximum prejudice. Jensen saw them as puzzles, problems to be understood, and then perhaps outsmarted. "Art, you spend more time drawing these blasted things than I do diffusing them," Miller would quip, wiping grease from his brow after a dive. Jensen would simply nod, his gaze distant, already envisioning the inner workings of the device. He believed there had to be a better way than simply blowing them up. The idea fermented in his mind, not just to destroy, but to neutralize, to render them harmless without a catastrophic blast, to disarm the enemy's weapon and deny its purpose without further destruction. It was a radical thought in an age defined by brute force, a whisper of subtlety in a symphony of explosions. But how to achieve such a feat against a device specifically designed to resist tampering, often incorporating anti-lift or anti-tamper mechanisms? That was the conundrum that consumed Jensen, driving him deeper into the technical specifics of each recovered fragment, each schematic drawing, each grim report of a vessel lost. He knew the answer lay not in more explosives, but in understanding the enemy's logic and turning it against itself. The frustration Jensen felt with the conventional approach to mine disposal deepened with every lost ship. He believed the enemy's ingenuity in creating magnetic influence mines demanded an equal, if not greater, level of ingenuity to defeat them. The TV, or kraut cabbage, as some divers grimly called it, was particularly insidious. It didn't need to be touched. It lay dormant until the precise magnetic signature of a large metal hull passed over it, triggering its internal firing mechanism. This made traditional contact mine disposal techniques, which involve severing moorings or directly manipulating the mine, utterly useless. To sweep for these mines, ships would often tow long cables with powerful electromagnets, hoping to trigger the mines from a safe distance. But this was inefficient, often missed mines, and left behind an unclear picture of the cleared channel. Jensen spent countless hours in the small makeshift ordnance lab aboard their tender dissecting diffused TV components recovered by the British. He learned that the magnetic trigger wasn't a simple on-off switch. It relied on a highly sensitive magnetic needle or fluxgate magnetometer, carefully balanced, that would shift its orientation in response to a change in the local magnetic field. This shift, in turn, completed an electrical circuit, igniting the primary detonator. The mine's casing was usually steel, but its internal mechanisms were shielded and often contained non-ferrous components designed to reduce susceptibility to external manipulation. Jensen theorized that if one could subtly, precisely, and non-invasively manipulate the magnetic field around the trigger, without directly touching the mine's sensitive casing or activating its anti-tamper devices, it might be possible to reset or de-energize the trigger circuit. His initial sketches were met with polite skepticism from Lieutenant Commander O'Connell. "Ensign, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but our current directives are clear. Locate, identify, and destroy. Tampering with live magnetic mines underwater, in low visibility, with improvised tools, it's simply too great a risk." O'Connell was a man of procedure and established protocols, and Jensen's ideas sounded dangerously close to amateur bomb disposal. Yet Jensen persisted. He argued that simply detonating every mine denied valuable intelligence. If they could recover a mine intact, they could study it, learn its secrets, and potentially develop countermeasures. His eyes lit up as he explained his concept. A specialized tool constructed entirely of non-magnetic materials like brass or hardened plastic, which would incorporate a small, precisely calibrated permanent magnet or a low-power electromagnet, carefully shielded. This Jensen neutralizer, as he envisioned it, would be used to create a controlled, localized magnetic field near the mine's trigger. The goal was not to detonate it, but to gently coax the magnetic needle into a safe or off position, effectively de-arming the mine without a violent explosion. The delicacy of the operation would be immense, requiring steady hands, keen observation, and an intimate knowledge of the mine's internal layout. Miller, who had initially joked about Jensen's nerd's approach, slowly became intrigued. He watched Jensen meticulously craft prototypes from scavenged parts, filing and shaping them with the precision of a watchmaker. Jensen explained the physics. "The mine reacts to a change in the magnetic field, Dave. If we can introduce a controlled static field, one that mimics its dormant state, we might be able to trick it into thinking no ship is passing." The danger was clear. Miscalculation by even a fraction of an inch or a sudden uncontrolled movement could easily trigger the device. But the potential payoff was enormous. Safely cleared channels, recovered enemy ordnance, and a significant reduction in the environmental and collateral damage of repeated underwater explosions. O'Connell, seeing Jensen's unwavering dedication and the logical foundation of his theory, eventually relented, but with strict caveats. Jensen would be granted limited access to a secure, isolated area of a naval base where defused mines were stored to conduct simulated underwater trials. Failure, O'Connell warned, would mean immediate cessation of the project. Jensen, undeterred, saw it as his chance to prove that courage was not just about facing a blast, but about outsmarting the darkness beneath the waves. The secure testing area felt more like a clandestine laboratory than a training ground. Jensen, clad in his heavy diving suit, descended into a deep, purpose-built tank, murky and cold, replicating the conditions of the North Atlantic seabed. Attached to a heavy frame at the bottom were several diffused German T4 magnetic mines, recovered earlier in the war and meticulously rendered inert for study. Lieutenant Commander O'Connell observed from above, a stopwatch in hand, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity etched on his face. Seaman Miller, acting as Jensen's tender, monitored his airlines and communications, his usual boisterousness muted by the gravity of the experiment. Jensen's neutralizer was a deceptively simple device, a brass rod, approximately 3 feet long, with a specialized non-magnetic clamp at one end, designed to attach to the mine casing, and a carefully insulated low-power electromagnet at the other, controlled by a small waterproof switch. The plan was to precisely position the electromagnet near the known location of the mine's magnetic trigger. The true innovation lay not just in the tool, but in the meticulous procedure Jensen had devised. He wouldn't simply switch on the magnet. Instead, he would gradually increase the current incrementally, observing the subtle responses he hoped to induce in the mine's internal mechanism. His first attempts were agonizingly slow. The heavy suit, the limited visibility, the numbing cold, all conspired against the fine motor control required. He fumbled, he overshot, he found his breath hitching. Even though the mines were inert, the psychological pressure was immense. He was wrestling with a ghost, an echo of death, and he knew that in a real scenario a single mistake would be fatal. Hours turned into days and days into weeks. O'Connell remained patient, but his patience was not limitless. Miller, however, saw Jensen's struggle and his unwavering determination. "Keep at it, Art," he'd transmit over the comms, his voice a steadying presence. "You'll get it." Then, a breakthrough. Jensen had been painstakingly adjusting the neutralizer's placement, his gloved fingers aching with the effort. He initiated the low-power current. Instead of the anticipated click or subtle vibration, he felt nothing. But on his small, custom-built test console, a tiny needle flickered. He repeated the procedure. The needle flickered again, settling into a new, stable position. He had found the exact magnetic sweet spot, the precise alignment of field lines that induced a change in the mine's trigger mechanism, without causing it to arm or detonate. The mine was tricked into believing it was in a magnetically neutral environment, de-energizing its primary trigger. O'Connell, observing the test data from the surface, saw the confirmation. A small but significant victory. With this success, O'Connell secured permission for a live trial, not just on a single isolated mine, but on a field of them. The target, a recently discovered German minefield in a vital but disused channel near a Scottish port, blocking potential access for emergency resupply. The channel was too narrow for traditional sweeping. Jensen would go in alone, with Miller as his backup on the surface. The pressure was almost unbearable. This was not a test with inert devices. These were live mines, each packed with 500 pounds of hexanite. Jensen descended into the frigid depths. The visibility was poor, the current stronger than in the test tank. He located the first mine, a grim, barnacle-encrusted cylinder. His training took over, his movements becoming fluid, precise. He attached the neutralizer, his heart thumping against his ribs. He activated the low-power current, his eyes glued to a small, pressure-activated indicator light on the device that would confirm a change in the mine's state. Time stretched, then a faint glow. The mine was neutralized. He repeated the process methodically, for 7 more mines over the course of 3 nerve-wracking hours. Each success was met with a surge of relief, followed by the renewed tension of the next target. When he finally ascended, exhausted but exhilarated, O'Connell met him with a rare, genuine smile. "Ensign Jensen," he said, "you've just done the impossible. The channel was declared safe." And the first mine whisperer had proven his worth. Word of Ensign Jensen's unconventional technique spread quickly, initially as a hushed rumor among the British and American naval commands, then as an official, highly classified protocol. His method, dubbed controlled magnetic neutralization, offered a paradigm shift in mine disposal. No longer was it a brute force contest. It was a delicate dance of ingenuity and precision. The first successful clearance of the Scottish Channel was followed by similar high-stakes missions. He was deployed to clear strategic harbour entrances in North Africa, then critical shipping lanes in the Mediterranean, often working under the cover of darkness or in exceptionally poor visibility, his only companions the heavy equipment and the silent, menacing forms of the mines. Each mission added to Jensen's grim tally, but also to his growing legend. He became known as the Mine Whisperer, a man who could communicate with, and ultimately disarm, the most fearsome weapons of the deep. His technique allowed for the recovery of several intact German TRV mines, providing invaluable intelligence to Allied ordnance experts. They studied the internal mechanisms, the anti-tamper features, and the precise design of the magnetic triggers, leading to improved countermeasures and safer sweeping techniques. The impact was tangible. Within 6 months of his method's adoption, shipping losses in areas cleared by Jensen's team dropped by an astonishing 30%, and hundreds of thousands of tons of critical war materials reached their destinations unimpeded. But the personal cost to Jensen was immense. The psychological burden of working with live explosives, knowing that a single tremor, a misplaced tool, or an unforeseen flaw in the mine's design could mean instant vaporization, weighed heavily on him. He found himself increasingly withdrawn, his quiet demeanor hardening into a stoic resolve. Sleep became elusive, haunted by visions of flashing lights and silent explosions. He developed a meticulous, almost ritualistic approach to his dives, checking and rechecking his equipment, visualizing each step of the procedure, steeling his nerves against the cold dread. Miller, now a petty officer second class, became his most trusted tender, often anticipating Jensen's needs before they were voiced. He observed the change in his friend, the lines of tension etched around his eyes, the way he would sometimes stare blankly into the distance. "You okay, Art?" he'd ask gently, knowing the answer was almost always, "Just thinking." Jensen was thinking about the mines, always the mines. He began to understand them not as inert objects, but as extensions of the enemy's cunning. He started to discern subtle variations, slight changes in casing, minor adjustments to attachment points, hints that the enemy was not static, but evolving. His own technique, while revolutionary, was built on a precise understanding of the TF's known magnetic trigger. He often wondered, what if the enemy changed the rules? What if they introduced a new type of mine, one that didn't play by the established magnetic principles he had so carefully deciphered? This nagging thought was a constant undercurrent to his successes, a dark cloud on the horizon. His superiors, however, were thrilled with the results. Lieutenant Commander O'Connell, now a commander and a fervent advocate of Jensen's methods, ensured his team received the best available support. Jensen was quietly awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism and unparalleled innovation in mine countermeasures. But the medals and commendations meant little to him. His true reward was each successfully cleared channel, each ship that passed safely, each life preserved. He was a man of action, not accolades, and the silent war in the depths continued to demand his unique brand of courage, pushing him ever closer to the breaking point he both feared and accepted as an inevitable consequence of his dangerous calling. The ocean kept its secrets, but Jensen was slowly, painstakingly prying them open. As the war shifted its focus to the Pacific, so too did Ensign Jensen's specialized unit. The tropical waters of the Pacific were a stark contrast to the cold, murky North Atlantic, yet the threat of enemy mines remained just as deadly. The Japanese, with their own unique naval strategies, deployed a variety of mines, including contact, acoustic, and magnetic types. Initially, Jensen found that his controlled magnetic neutralization technique was effective against many of the Japanese magnetic mines, which shared design principles with their German counterparts, often through shared intelligence or captured designs. His reputation preceded him. The mine whisperer of the Atlantic was now tasked with taming the Pacific's underwater threats. His team cleared critical approaches to newly captured islands, allowing vital supply convoys to bring in troops and equipment for the relentless island-hopping campaign. But Jensen's nagging fear of enemy adaptation soon materialized. During a crucial operation to clear the entrance to a strategically vital harbor in the Philippines, a new type of Japanese mine was encountered. It was visually similar to a known Japanese Type 92 magnetic mine, which Jensen had successfully neutralized dozens of times. The intelligence reports suggested no significant modifications. The mission was urgent. A large invasion fleet was due to arrive in less than 48 hours, and this channel was the only viable path. Jensen descended, his movements as methodical and precise as ever. Petty Officer Miller, his tender, kept a close watch from the surface, feeding him data and monitoring his vitals. Jensen located the mine, noting its familiar cylindrical shape and the telltale magnetic sensor housing. He attached his neutralizer, his custom-built brass tool humming faintly as he activated the low-power electromagnet, slowly increasing the current. He waited for the confirmation light, the small glow that signified the mine's magnetic trigger had been neutralized. But the light never came. Instead, an agonizingly slow, deep hum resonated through the water, a sound Jensen had never heard before, but which filled him with an instant primal dread. The mine wasn't neutralizing. It was reacting in an entirely new, terrifying way. He looked closer, his faceplate just inches from the mine's casing. A tiny, almost imperceptible panel on the side, one he had previously dismissed as a minor structural detail, was now vibrating, and he could see a faint, rhythmic pulsing light emanating from within it. "Miller, something's wrong." Jensen's voice was tight with urgency. "The mine, it's not reacting as expected. It's creating a secondary field, I think an acoustic one, in response to my neutralizer." Miller's voice crackled with alarm. "Art, get out of there, abort." But it was too late. The hum intensified, and the pulsing light accelerated. The mine, a Japanese Type 93 acoustic magnetic influence mine, had an ingenious anti-tamper mechanism. It was designed to detect the specific frequency and magnetic signature of sweepers, or as it turned out, Jensen's neutralizer, and then arm a secondary acoustic trigger. His attempt to neutralize the magnetic component had, in fact, activated the acoustic one, rendering the mine far more volatile. Any further manipulation or even the sound of his exhaled bubbles could trigger it. He realized with sickening clarity that his technique, perfected for the German TMV, was now a deadly liability against this cunning new design. He had, inadvertently, armed the mine he was trying to disarm. The twist was a cruel lesson. The enemy learned and adapted, making yesterday's innovation today's trap. The situation was dire. Jensen had inadvertently armed a sophisticated Japanese mine, rendering it even more sensitive and dangerous. The rhythmic pulsing light he had seen was an indicator of its armed status, and the deep hum was its newly active acoustic sensor, listening for any sound, a passing ship, a diver's breath, even the smallest collision with a tool. Retreating was no longer a simple option. The mine was a ticking time bomb, exquisitely poised to detonate. "Miller, the mine is active. Acoustic sensor engaged," Jensen transmitted, his voice betraying a hint of strain but his mind racing. "I can't just leave it. If it detonates, it could set off the entire field. The fleet is hours away." Commander O'Connell, listening from the surface, issued a direct order. "Jensen, fall back. We'll attempt a broad sweep to clear the area, accept the losses if necessary." But Jensen knew the broad sweep was a gamble. It could still miss mines, and the chaotic detonations could throw up debris, creating new hazards. He was a man who solved problems, not created bigger ones. He remembered his earlier frustration with the destroy-in-place methods. He couldn't simply blow this up. He had to disarm it for real this time. His eyes scanned the mine's casing again. this time with a desperate new focus. The Type 93. Its design was subtle, a variant he'd only seen on schematics, never encountered in the field. He recalled a small detail from an intelligence brief, a theoretical vulnerability in the acoustic trigger's frequency response. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble based on an educated guess. He needed to flood the acoustic sensor with an overwhelming incoherent sonic signature, effectively deafening it, while simultaneously trying to decouple the magnetic trigger's circuit before it could re-engage. "Commander," Jensen's voice was firm, "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might work. I need a concentrated high-frequency acoustic pulse precisely timed, and I'll need a specialized non-ferrous charge casing, modified for directional detonation, not to destroy but to disrupt a specific internal circuit." O'Connell hesitated, the weight of the fleet's safety pressing down on him. "Ensign, that's entirely experimental. We don't have equipment for that in the field." "Then we improvise, Commander. My neutralizer's magnet can be used to generate a focused, fluctuating field, and I can manually short-circuit the acoustic sensor if I can gain access to that panel," Jensen explained, pointing towards the small, vibrating panel on the mine's side, his breath misting his faceplate. "But I'll need an extra set of hands. Miller, can you get me the fine-gauge ceramic cutting tools and a small, non-magnetic pressure detonator? And quickly." Miller, without question, began assembling the requested tools. He knew Jensen's genius lay in these moments of improvisation. He rapidly descended, carrying the makeshift kit. Working side by side in the terrifying silence, broken only by their labored breathing, Jensen guided Miller. While Miller used the ceramic tools to carefully pry open the vibrating panel, a task of immense delicacy, as any sudden jolt could be catastrophic, Jensen reconfigured his neutralizer. He had to create a pulsed magnetic field, rapidly fluctuating, to create acoustic interference. It was an unprecedented, nerve-wracking attempt to use his tool not to neutralize magnetism, but to generate controlled noise, confusing the mine's primary sensor. The minutes dragged into an eternity. Miller's hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he worked the delicate ceramic blade. Jensen, meanwhile, manipulated his repurposed neutralizer, sending controlled, fluctuating magnetic pulses towards the mine, hoping they translated into enough acoustic distortion to blind the mine's listening ear. Finally, with a soft click, Miller managed to expose a small, delicate circuit board behind the panel. "Got it, Art." "Now, the pressure detonator," Jensen instructed. He had a radical plan. Instead of blowing up the mine, he would use a tiny, carefully placed, non-magnetic pressure detonator, not with explosive force, but with a highly localized, controlled impulse to sever a specific internal wire controlling the acoustic trigger, effectively cutting off its power supply. It was like performing microsurgery on a bomb. He carefully placed the tiny charge, securing it with non-magnetic adhesive tape. "Prepare to ascend, Dave," he commanded, his voice strained. "On my mark." He attached a short remote igniter to the charge. "Mark!" he yelled, and both divers finned upwards, their hearts pounding. A split second later, a soft, almost inaudible thump vibrated through the water. Not an explosion, but a muffled thud. Jensen looked back. The pulsing light on the mine had vanished. The ominous hum had ceased. The Type 93 was inert. The improvised, high-risk, two-stage technique had worked. They had not merely disarmed it, but diagnosed and then treated its specific evolving threat. The channel was safe, the fleet secured, and Jensen had once again, under unimaginable pressure, outsmarted the darkness. Ensign Jensen's second, more complex innovation, born out of the crisis of the Type 93 mine, marked a pivotal moment in naval mine warfare. His ability to not only identify but also adapt to evolving enemy technologies transformed the role of the Navy diver from simple disposal into specialized ordnance intelligence and surgical neutralization. This two-stage approach, first to blind or confuse an influence trigger, then to surgically sever its internal arming mechanism, became the blueprint for future mine disposal protocols. It was a testament to the power of individual ingenuity, over the relentless march of technological warfare. Throughout the remainder of the war, Jensen, now a lieutenant, continued to lead his specialized unit, often deployed to the most dangerous and critical minefields. He trained a new generation of divers, instilling in them not just the procedures, but the mindset of meticulous observation, critical thinking, and the courage to innovate under pressure. His techniques, meticulously documented and refined, were incorporated into the U.S. Navy's first formal explosive ordnance disposal, EOD, training programs, which would become standard after the war. The principles he pioneered, understanding the enemy's device, precise neutralization over indiscriminate destruction, and the adaptation of tools for specific complex scenarios, laid the foundational groundwork for modern EOD. His methods saved countless ships and lives, enabling crucial amphibious landings and securing vital supply lines across both the Atlantic and Pacific theaters. The broader historical implications of Jensen's work were profound. Before his contributions, mine warfare was largely a game of chance and attrition. His innovations introduced an element of intellectual warfare, forcing both sides to continuously evolve their designs and countermeasures. It highlighted the critical importance of human intelligence and ingenuity in an increasingly mechanized conflict, proving that even against the most sophisticated weaponry, a single, determined mind could tip the scales. His transformation from a quiet, frustrated ensign to a pioneering figure in naval EOD mirrored the war's demands on individuals. To adapt, to innovate, and to find courage in the face of previously unimagined threats. After the war, Lieutenant Arthur Jensen, despite his decorations and the quiet reverence of his peers, largely faded from the public eye. He respectfully declined offers for further advancement within the Navy, his war-weary spirit yearning for the tranquility he had once so meticulously sought to preserve. He returned to a quiet life in New England, pursuing a career as a consulting engineer, specializing in underwater construction and salvage. He found solace in building rather than dismantling, in creating safe passage rather than clearing dangerous ones. He never spoke much of his wartime exploits, often deflecting praise with a humble wave of his hand. "I just did what needed to be done," he would say, his gaze still holding that distant, analytical quality. He did, however, maintain a quiet correspondence with Commander O'Connell, who eventually rose to the rank of Rear Admiral, and with Petty Officer Miller, who continued his distinguished career in the Navy's nascent EOD community. Jensen's legacy, though unheralded by the broader public, was deeply ingrained in naval doctrine. His Jensen neutralizer, in its various evolved forms, became a standard tool for mine disposal. His methodical approach to mine intelligence and neutralization saved countless lives in the post-war cleanup of global minefields and continues to influence the tactics of specialized EOD units to this day. He faced the silent, hidden enemy beneath the waves, not with explosions but with intellect, courage, and a deep, unwavering commitment to finding a better way. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.